day, and welcome to Overlanders That Are Now. I'm Tom Bingo, speaking to you as always from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother in travel, Jim King. How are things down in Connecticut, Jim?
Excellent, Banks. Well, it's still winter, but spring is near. And whenever I think of spring, I think of Copenhagen.
Oh, really, Jim?
No, not really. Not at all. But that's the topic of today's reflection, right? So it seemed like a good transition.
Oh, Jim, so smooth, Jimmy. Well, let's get into it, Jim. Copenhagen, city of spires.
Yeah, why that nickname, by the way?
Well, Jimmy, you may remember from my reading to you from my favorite guidebook, Let's Go Europe,
Okay.
that Copenhagen's, medieval Renaissance style spires on top of its many churches and castles gave it that nickname.
Hmm.
But Doc, you'll be interesting to know that the city has another more recent nickname.
Oh, don't tell me you still have that guidebook.
Oh, Jimmy, come on, of course I do. But don't worry, I'm not going to read from it. But I
Good.
remember how much you love my impromptu lectures, Jim.
Oh, still traumatized, but do tell, Banks, what's the nickname?
Are you ready, Jimmy? Then listen to this one. All right. In addition to the city of Spires, Copenhagen today is known as the capital of sustainable meetings.
Wow, now that's a catchy nickname.
Wow, Jimmy, it's based on Copenhagen's, recent, 21st century focus on green and sustainable practices, particularly in the context, of hosting meetings and conferences. And
Uh,
another nickname, Jimmy, how about this one, is Bien, which means the village in Danish, even though its current population is about 1.2 million.
well, there's another forgettable nickname. But who's in charge of marketing
Oh,
over
yeah.
there? Anyway, let's get back to the
Oh,
city of Spires as experienced by two wide eyed Midwesterners in 1977.
Jimmy, great idea. I think this was the first time that we put our new travel strategy to work, where we'll split up for the day to see whatever each of us wanted to see, but then meet for dinner to discuss the day and of course plan the day ahead, Jimmy.
Right. It was actually our second day in Copenhagen. The previous day, we decided to splurge on a bus tour to get an overview of the city's sights, which,
Yeah.
by the way, is an excellent way to get an overview of the city. But if you're on a shoestring budget like we were, you can't always do that.
Right, Jimmy. But that particular extravagance was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the famous Tivoli Gardens, the second oldest amusement park in the world, was closed, we took in a lot during that tour, Jimmy. Even from the famous Stroyer, to Rosenberg Castle, Fredericksburg Park was outstanding, and the most touristy sight of all, the statue of the Little Mermaid, Jim.
Yeah, for me, that was a huge disappointment. It looks out over a really uninspiring view. I think there's a refinery or something across the bay. And, all the male tourists eager to get their picture taken while fondling the mermaid. Yeah, kind of creepy.
Ooh, Jimmy, I remember that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure Hans Christian Andersen would approve. Anyway, the tour gave us a good idea of what we wanted to see in more detail. And since we had different ideas on that score, we decided to split. All right, we'll meet up much later to catch the overnight train to Stockholm. So, Doc, what are the things you remember most from wandering around the city of sustainable meetings?
Well, yeah, as you know, I grew up just outside of Cleveland before its renaissance when crime was high and the river, the Cuyahoga, was so polluted it caught fire.
Yep,
So,
I get
what
that.
struck me about Copenhagen and all its harbors and canals was the cleanliness of the city and its energy also. A lot of people day and night, downtown Cleveland,
Yep.
didn't exactly have a wild nightlife, but Copenhagen did. I'd never been exposed to a city where people in the city center and, you know, actually live there instead of out in the suburbs. So I know that sounds a little bit strange now, but that's how it struck me.
Oh, Doc, yeah, same here. Doc, the Danes really seem to put an emphasis on making the city livable and
Right.
enjoyable for all ages. I
Yeah.
was amazed at the number of parks, Jimmy, gardens, major bike path systems, and how the city was laid out to encourage, older people to thoroughly enjoy getting around town, whether it's walking or biking and Jimmy, it's kind of an interesting point. Cars, of
Hmm.
course, the almighty in the United States was second to bikes, and the cyclists seemed sacred. Walking was so important, but not cars were not dominating the streets. And Jimmy, I'll never get all the ones that were there. They're always smaller, cleaner, no bruises, and non-polluting. I don't know, Jim. I just love the idea of all generations walking and biking together. It seemed so civilized.
Yeah, I'm imagining, a backpacker today. If we were on bikes, they'd be saying, "Wow, look at that, old people riding bikes."
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I know there was one area in
Oh, Jimmy.
particular that stands out in your mind.
Jimmy, and it's still, as I talk about it, it's just a magic revelation. Why we travel. The Stroye,
Hmm,
Stroget, 5 to 6 block zone, pure pedestrians, Jim. No cars at all.
right.
Large streets now were filled with walkers, shoppers, not cars. Jimmy, I can remember we could walk, never feeling that, oh my God, there's a car going to be coming behind us. Someone's going to be honking their horn. And the people love the freedom from the auto. They never seen anything. I've never seen anything like that in the U.S. And it was just magical, Jimmy. And it made sense that it was increasing the quality of life for all. And doc, shops were full. And again, all ages, not just the hip youth
Yeah,
downtown.
I agree. It felt, very safe, didn't it?
Yeah,
Very open.
yeah,
And by open, I mean in terms of open-mindedness and open to pornography. It seems that porn shops are everywhere, not just
yeah,
limited to a specific part of
yeah,
the city, as is often the case in American cities. It was kind of jarring at first to see families, little old ladies out shopping, all strolling
yep.
casually by, taking no notice at all, it seemed. Even the men and couples coming out didn't try to hide their face or, look at all ashamed. Obviously, this made an impression.
Jimmy reminds me of something we wrote about in the blog, but I can't help laughing about it now. Are you ready, Doc? On that first day, okay, we're going to get together. Oh, here's a bar. The first bar in the continent. We ordered a couple of Tuborgs and Carlsbergs. I never
Right.
saw. Remember, I can't forget that sign. That just really brought us in. We're going to start planning for the next day.
Yep.
Well, the bar was practically empty when we got it. But when we looked around later after we finished our planning, there was not a single woman to be seen.
Our very first bar turns out to be gay. That was a real shocker for us.
Exactly, Jimmy. For us, a shocker. But for the Danes, no, it didn't seem like a big deal at all. Having a gay bar right on Main Street, no closed door with a secret knock or whatever. People didn't care. And we know, we definitely know that wasn't the case in the USA at
Not
all.
back then, right? Yeah. Well, thankfully, for the most part, we've become a more accepting country. So, Binks,
Yeah.
what's the one thing
Well,
about Copenhagen you remember the most?
Jimmy, this is a great accidental, our exploration of the town. I think seeing artists and free spirits and hippies enjoying life on their own terms, without anyone castigating them, putting them down.
Hmm.
It was incredible, Jimmy. A village of woodstockers. And I understand 50 years later, this famous town called, Village Christiana is a former industrial area
Oh,
that they
yeah.
transform into an artist county, is still today a vibrant art community.
Oh, cool.
Wow. Yeah, it was great, Doc. Doc, any final thoughts on Copenhagen? It left an impact.
Definitely. Excuse me. Well, I think seeing how the city approached, making the urban experience really beneficial for all its citizens. You talked about that a bit. It just seemed that the culture was definitely years ahead of the U.S. in terms of acceptance of alternate expressions of and lifestyles. It was a great introduction to Scandinavia.
Yeah, Jimmy, and proof that our experience of splitting up and reuniting was going to be a great way to travel.
Yeah. Yep.
And that remains and yet we'll still remain friends. In fact, you look downright relieved to meet up at the train station that night.
No,
Doc,
don't go there. Don't
tell
go
the
there.
story there,
Uh,
Jimmy, about your wanderings.
all right. Well, yeah, after a day of wandering, I was, eager to get back to the train station. And while waiting for you, this really isn't much of a story, but kind of illustrates different mindset. While waiting for you, I was approached by a young woman who turned out to be a sex worker. Now, people were rushing in and out of the station, lots of families and even cops. And I was convinced, I was absolutely certain that I, a former altar boy, was about to be busted and thrown in jail. And I'm pretty sure I heard her laugh as I, practically ran away.
Jimmy, well, you made it safely and unarrested to the overnight train to Stockholm, Doc.
That's right. Uh, Stockholm, yes. We'll talk about that in our next podcast.
Right. Great Copenhagen. So until then, ladies and gentlemen,
School live,
skull,
everyone.
everyone.
All right. We
All
got that one
right.
pretty close, Binks.